Sara Whittingham, welcome to the Lean Out podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here. It's good to see you again.
Yes, I'm very happy to have you. So, we know each other. We used to work together a long time ago. Tell people nowadays what you're up to, what your work life balance is like, and how it's different from other anesthesiologists.
Yeah, I'm Sara Whittingham. I'm an anesthesiologist. I had practiced at the University of Utah until late 2019. Our family moved to the Cleveland area when my husband accepted a job at Northeast Ohio Medical University. And so our family moved right before COVID. Started working for Cleveland Clinic in June of 2020 at one of their regional hospitals. And then shortly after that, in November of 2020, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And so it really shook me. I really struggled a lot that first year. I don't know how much you want to go into my crazy story with that, but yeah, so that really, made me look at my work-life balance, trying to, focus on my health and putting that first. And it really, impacted me in a lot of ways. Since then, about a year ago, I cut back on my hours. Actually, Cleveland Clinic has a great program with paid FMLA. So I was able to take intermittent FMLA for half a day a week to have more energy to exercise and then go into work a little bit later and stay a little bit later on my late days. And then just recently, about 2 months ago, I stopped working and I'm going on disability so that I can focus on my health. And because I was so exhausted when I would get home from work that I wasn't able to exercise and I was not doing anything well. I was not being a good mom. The house was a mess. Like everything was just not getting done. And so by taking that time, I've been able to really focus on my health and what's important.
Yeah, I really wanted to interview you about this transition and about all of the realizations that you've had in focusing on your health because we definitely have that in common, but you've been through so much and have done a lot of advocacy work now. So tell people also the kind of work that you're doing that's non-clinical now.
Right. So I've become a very passionate advocate for veterans with Parkinson's disease. I served 20 years in the Air Force. I found out a year after my diagnosis that one of my Air Force Academy track teammates, Jenna Reed, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease the same month that I had been. Like I said, she's also a physician. She also had deployed to Afghanistan. And then to find out we were diagnosed the same month was pretty eye-opening. We had both applied for VA disability benefits and been denied, and were on our first appeal by the time we reconnected. We've learned since then that the VA policies on disability for Parkinson's don't match the science at all. You're required to be diagnosed within a year after leaving active duty, and it takes 10, 15 plus years after exposure to a toxin before somebody shows symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So I found that through a Freedom of Information Act, there's over 5,000 post 9/11 veterans who've applied for VA disability benefits for Parkinson's. Which puts it about 1 in 800, with the median age of that group in the mid to late 30s. That's 8 to 10 times higher than the general population, and these people are not being given access to VA benefits because of the current policy. So I've become a very active advocate for that. I had a meeting with some VA leadership earlier today, and I'm going to keep pushing. I'm trying to get better contacts with my senators and do everything I can to raise awareness of that issue because it is important to take care of our veterans and also to figure out why, so that we can protect our current and future service members. I think that's even more important, is to keep other people from having to go through this. So I've become a very passionate advocate about that. You can probably tell. And Jenna and I have joined forces and are working on that quite a lot. We did some advocacy when the TCE ban that went into effect earlier this year. We joined forces with another Air Force Academy graduate, female, young mother as well, who also has Parkinson's. And so the three of us are, we feel like we're a pretty strong face. Three young women who shouldn't have Parkinson's, went to the same school. Like less than 1,000 women graduated between 95 and 2000. And the three of us have young onset Parkinson's, I think says something. So we're really working hard to raise awareness to that.
Absolutely. And I know that you've also been a real role model and done some public facing work about taking care of yourself with Parkinson's disease and making sure that you continue to exercise and leading a healthy lifestyle. You were on the Today Show as someone who was doing an Ironman with Parkinson's disease, and that was wonderful. So, are you giving talks or what
Yeah.
other things are you doing about that?
Yeah. So a little backstory there. When I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I pictured my future based on what I had learned about Parkinson's 20 years ago as a medical student. And that that diagram of the different progressions, slowly ending up in a wheelchair. And so even though my neurologist was telling me that I was still going to have a good life, I had a lot of good years, I'm picturing myself out wheelchair shopping. And so that's, I really struggled that first year to overcome that image of what Parkinson's was in my head. I was super fortunate to enroll in a research study that was studying the effects of cycling on the progression of Parkinson's disease. And I quickly found that the more I rode the bike, the better I felt. And so there's actually quite a bit of evidence now that shows that high intensity exercise, high cadence exercise can slow the progression of the disease. There's no medications or surgery that are able to do that. I had a physician early on tell me I shouldn't run anymore because I might fall. And that was the thinking when we were in medical school, is that, oh, be careful, you're a fall risk, don't do too much. When in reality, we need to be doing a lot more. And so I'm really trying to raise awareness to other physicians that, encourage your people with Parkinson's to get out there and exercise and push themselves, and also to inspire other people with Parkinson's to do the same. And, trying to figure out how to get 60, 70, 80-year-old people who've never been athletes to become athletes at this point in their life is a little bit of a challenge, but it's kind of fun too. And they realize that they can do things that they never would have done otherwise before Parkinson's. So it's an interesting. I enjoy it, because having been an athlete my whole life and trying to inspire people, I kind of feel like it's, very lucky to be in this position where I can be in that position to help other people find their way.
Yeah, it's such important work, both aspects of what you're doing, the VA benefits and figuring out why so many people are getting Parkinson's disease in this population, and then also encouraging people who have it or who get new diagnoses to take care of themselves in a different way that really will help their quality of life. So I'm sure these are really fulfilling things, but at the same time, I know it was probably difficult to walk away from anesthesia. So you had mentioned when you first started talking about this a little bit about, well, we could go into that more, which is when you got the diagnosis, the realizations, and kind of what you went through. I'd like you to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I, kind of thought it was the beginning of the end for me. I, pictured myself on this downward trajectory with no control and just feeling powerless to do anything about it, which is, kind of what I had remembered from medical school. And it really took meeting other people who had been living with this disease for years to change that perception. My neurologist had tried to tell me that I was going to be fine. I was still going to be able to go do things and have a lot of good years ahead of me. And I didn't believe a word he said. But after meeting other people who had been living with Parkinson's disease for years and who had been exercising, it completely changed my mindset and helped me think about what was possible. I think the best example of that is at the 2024 Boston Marathon. I ran as a para-athlete alongside Rhonda Fowles. And Rhonda was diagnosed in 1998. She had never been a runner before, never run a marathon, and she was on her way to run her 125th marathon 25 years after diagnosis. And so meeting her and seeing her story kind of gave me permission to set long-term goals and say, okay, maybe I can still be running 20 years from now. Maybe I can, think that way. And so it's really shown me the power of a positive mindset because, if you're picturing yourself in a wheelchair 10 years from now, there's no way you're going to finish a marathon. But if you're thinking about finishing a marathon, you might actually finish that marathon, or you might be in a wheelchair depending on what happens, but you definitely have a chance of doing that if that's what your mindset is. And so it's really shown me the power of forward thinking and thinking of our futures in a positive way and learning to ignore the negative because it's wasted energy. Like if you're focusing your energy on what you can't do and what hurts and what's, this sucks and I'm tired all the time. It's a waste of time, and instead of doing that, just set that aside and think about what you can do and learn to be grateful for that. And I've found that to be incredibly powerful lesson that I've learned in all of this. It's really changed how I look at everything is, just trying to find the good in every situation and ignoring the bad because it's pointless. It's not even worth wasting my energy on. So,
Mm.
it's really changed my perspective on a lot of things and how I look at things. Um, so I guess and the other thing, when I was first diagnosed, so I had worked as an Air Force flight surgeon for 3 years before anesthesia residency. And so as a flight surgeon, our job is to determine whether or not a pilot is safe to fly and to do their job as a pilot. And I was put in the position to ground and end a pilot's career for much less than this. And so when I was diagnosed, I kind of felt like a hypocrite. Like I'm going to go to work tomorrow. Nobody's going to say, oh, can you do your job? Can you do this? It was going to be up to me. And so I really felt like a hypocrite initially, like, okay, how am I going to know when it's time to stop? Like, how am I going to know when I'm no longer safe or when I pose a risk to patients? And that was what is on my mind from day one. I think a lot of it because of my background in flight medicine. And so that kind of hit hard too. Is like, I have a tremor in my arm, but it's a resting tremor. So I mean, I can hold my arm still to intubate, and I can still do ultrasound guided nerve blocks and feel like I can keep the needle in plane. But as a disease progressed, and I had patients asking me if I was nervous before their surgery because my arm's shaking, and I would be upfront and honest with them. But it was still, made me wonder, like, okay, I'm probably not doing a lot to reassure them that they're going to be safe from their surgery because, with Parkinson's disease, in the end, it came down to the stress of, I think, worrying that I wasn't going to be sharp enough. I felt like I wasn't able to keep track of multiple operating rooms at once and would continuously mix up PACU patients. And I would try to write it all down, but the stress of double and triple checking everything constantly, I would get home and just pass out. And so it was time to step away. I think I would have had a really hard time if there would have been a bad patient outcome and I had questioned it was because of my Parkinson's disease and that I should have stepped away earlier. And so that's what it came down to in the end. But it was definitely on my mind from day one, is like, how am I going to know when I should stop? Well, many of my colleagues would say, oh, you're fine, you could keep on going. But I was really, beginning to get worried that I would cause harm. And I think that's when it was time for me to step aside.
That's such a good point because I think that there is no right answer to that question. And you're on the other side now. And even looking back, you can't say that there's one definitive thing. It's more like that the stress of worrying about what could happen is overtaking the joy of doing the work or the benefits or the fulfillment you're getting from it. So it's like a cost benefit analysis, and you want to get out before something bad happens, like you said.
I don't wanna live my life, with that on my shoulders, knowing that I could have prevented it if I hadn't tried to keep on going. And so, it's hard. I'm somebody who had never called in sick a day in my life. I know there was one day in residency, I was throwing up in the parking lot and went in and worked anyways. I've one of those people who always kind of powered through. And so to transition to somebody who's needing some time off, and it wasn't hard for me initially, but I'm super fortunate. And, my colleagues at Cleveland Clinic and the leadership there has been very, very supportive all along. And it's really made a big difference for me.
That's great. And this change to step away from clinical medicine is pretty recent, correct?
Right. Just about 2 months ago, actually. So I stepped aside. I'd had a conversation with my movement disorder specialist. I think that was in March. We had talked about it. And then I had a meeting with my primary care doctor in June, and he happens to be the chief medical officer of the hospital where I work, which was somewhat strategic because he's responsible for the safety of the patients. I wanted him to be able to weigh in on it and keep an eye on me as well. And so we had a conversation, and we decided it was probably for everybody's benefit for me to step aside. And I always thought when this day came that I would be really upset about it and I would feel this huge sense of loss. But actually it just felt like a huge weight had lifted off my shoulders. Like I just could take a deep breath and say, okay, it's okay. I mean, I miss it and I miss my colleagues at work, and I miss, talking to patients and reassuring them and blocks and all of that. But I found so many other things to do that I'm even more passionate about with my advocacy. And I've started writing a book for people with Parkinson's, which I'm, having a lot of fun with. So I've managed to find a way to fill my entire calendar again, even though I'm not working. But it's nice that I have control over that, and I can take a break when I need it, and make sure I'm getting my exercise as much as I can to stay healthy. So
You basically answered the question I was going to ask, which is like, how has this felt? Because everyone knows that it's difficult when you have an identity change like this. And I love that the weight feels like it's lifted and that it's been more relieving than you think. And I think that that shows people that when they have an anticipation that something is going to be bad, that it's going to feel bad, that it's going to feel like a big loss, that it doesn't necessarily, the reality doesn't necessarily match that.
yeah, no, I always thought, oh man, I love my job. I love what I do. I mean, I don't ever want to have to stop. And I really thought I would, really feel this huge sense of loss. And I I haven't missed it at all, actually, other than the people that I work with. But Yeah, I just felt this big like weight off my shoulders that, okay, I don't have to worry about all of that anymore. I can focus on doing what I need to do to stay healthy, which was, obviously more important to me than than working as an anesthesiologist. So yeah, it's been a transition, but I worry that I'll get lazy and not stay busy. So I try to have a schedule each day and keep going. But yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey. And another topic that is interesting to me is the decision whether or not to share your diagnosis like this with your colleagues and your leadership. I was very open from day one, and I feel like I had that I could do that, for several reasons. One, I'm not the primary breadwinner for my family, and so if I were to lose my job, like, my kids could still go to college. I mean, it'd be a financial difference, but not a hardship. And so having that being in that position also, I mean, I had really good disability coverage, and so I felt more comfortable speaking up to my leadership about my concerns over what I was doing and my scheduling, and as a result, I was able to cut back my hours in a reasonable way because I was able to share that. And I wasn't feeling stressed that I had to hide my diagnosis from them and try to pretend like everything was okay, that I could be open. And that helped the stress a lot as well. So, I mean, I know a lot of people, especially in medicine, you want to look tough and, and try to keep those things private, which is obviously you're right if you want to do that. But I feel like I got so much more support from my colleagues and my leadership by being open about it. And like I said, I probably wouldn't have been so open had I been in a position where, like, oh my gosh, if they tell me I can't be an anesthesiologist anymore, I'm not going to be able to send my kids to college, right? I would have definitely looked at that differently. So it was very fortunate that I was in a position to speak up, but I was pleasantly surprised at how much support I got and how much that helped me be able to work longer. About a year after my diagnosis, I wasn't sleeping well at all that first year, and so I was really tired all the time, and the dopamine agonists I'm on make me really sleepy. Like, one of the side effects is excessive daytime sleepiness, and I fell asleep at a red light on my way home from work one afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I woke up. I think that they must have thought my car stalled because people were just driving around me, like, in the middle of the road. Right. So I was like, "Crap. Like, if I can't stay awake driving home from work, I'm not safe to work as an anesthesiologist." And so at that point, I called my boss and tearfully, I was really upset, saying, "I don't think I can keep working. If I can't stay awake in the car driving home, how can I sit in an operating room and stay awake reasonably?" And so they ended up giving me a month off work with pay, to reassess my medications, regroup. I was able to start exercising a lot more during that time. And having that time, like, made all the difference. I mean, that was in January of 2022. So I was able to work another, like, what, 2.5 years after that. And I think, it would have been, if I had just tried to power through, I don't think I would have made it as long as I did. But having that time just to stop and regroup and, to take a step back, see what trajectory my life was on, which was not good at that point, and set some goals and figure things out was huge.
Wow, what a supportive organization and workplace. That really says a lot about them.
Yeah.
And I think you hit the nail on the head in that there's some factors that are in your control over how much kind of agency you have in being able to share these things. But then also, I feel like if you share, a lot of times people really do want you to succeed. There might be some toxic workplaces where you already, can read the room and you know that you shouldn't say anything. But I think your story is really a testament that they want to support you. They want to help you. They want you to succeed and do well.
No, absolutely. And I'm so fortunate that, I worked for an organization that was like that. But even so, I mean, I feel like I would have been worried that people were, judging me or looking at me. But by being open about it, I could kind of joke about it, And so, people talk about how many steps they get. And I was like, oh, yeah, if I put my watch on my trimmer arm, I get like 20,000 steps a day just sitting here. Like, I could joke about it, in a way that was like, okay, let's find the good things about this and make light of it and make it okay for people to, ask me questions and talk about it, because I would prefer that than to people be whispering behind my back, so I mean, I felt people were super supportive, and part of that is help people be your advocates and let them know how they can support you. Because sometimes people hear you have a tough diagnosis, they don't know how to respond or what you want. And for me, I wanted cheerleaders. I wanted people to cheer me on and say, keep working out, keep exercising. I didn't want people to say, oh, I'm so sorry you have Parkinson's. Like, I didn't want that. But maybe some people do. But for me, it was helpful to, like, let people know that, okay, I need to exercise. I need you to cheer me on. I've got this race coming up, and like let them know how they could support me. People may not respond the way that you want them to, but it's not that they have bad feelings towards you. They just don't know how to respond. And like I said, like everybody's different of what they would want. Some people, may just want to, yeah, I have Parkinson's, but I don't really feel like talking about it. Or some people may want you to ask questions. But I think letting people know what you want can make a big difference for everybody involved.
I think that's such a good point, and it applies to a professional environment, but also just applies to everyday relationships, like your
Right.
friend relationships and your romantic relationships. Like keeping what you want a secret and then being resentful later is just not a good way to operate.
Right, right. You can't expect somebody to guess what it is that you want and then like be mad when they don't deliver on that. But if you are, sharing, what's important to you or what you want, I think people in general, I think want to be able to help you. But like I said, a lot of times just don't know how. I've learned a lot, but like you said about relationships and. I've been able to interact with a lot of different people with Parkinson's from around the world and learning, different cultures and the ways that their cultures deal with Parkinson's. I've been working on a book that kind of talks about some of this and helping people share with others. There's a man in Uganda whose mother had Parkinson's when he was growing up, and they didn't know it was Parkinson's, but she, was very shaky, and so everyone thought that she was a witch. And so their entire family was ostracized. She was locked in a room, not allowed to see her children grow up. Food was passed to her through a little hole in the wall, and she died alone. And so this man, Hannington Kabugo, now is an advocate for people with Parkinson's in Uganda, and he goes to high schools and educates students about what Parkinson's is and how they can help people and helps people get their medication and helps educate local healthcare providers about what it is and what to look for so that nobody has to go through what his mother and what his family went through. So there's so many different cultural aspects of disease and medicine, and I've really learned so much talking to different people from all different cultures. I contact with a man from Greece, one from England. There's a woman in Australia whose family's from El Salvador, and she lives in two different worlds where her Australian workmates want her to be an advocate and speak loudly and say, we need to protect people with Parkinson's. And her family wants her to maybe move to another state because they don't want to embarrass them and that she should be really quiet about it. And so she's trying to balance these two different cultures. Even within the United States, there's different people come from different backgrounds of how illness is looked at and, and how people treat you as a result. And as a physician, I kind of thought about it a little bit, but now, I really look at that, much differently as well. So it's, really changed my thinking about medicine. Yeah, so.
Absolutely. So we touched a little bit on some finance stuff, and I know that you're a big advocate of getting good disability insurance because you never know what is going to happen.
Yeah, I was very, very, very lucky. When I worked at the University of Utah, I did not have anything extra other than whatever very little that would have been covered by them. And so when I went to Cape Cleveland Clinic, they have excellent disability coverage. And I was able to, even though because of their agreement with Guardian, even though I had already been diagnosed, I was able to the next open season sign up for it. And as long as I'd had the insurance for more than 2 years by the time I went on disability and used it, it would still cover a pre-existing condition. And so I was very lucky to be in a position where I could still buy the supplemental policy even after my diagnosis, which most people wouldn't have been. And so having that too kind of, freed me up to talk about my concerns about work because I knew that if somebody agreed that, okay, maybe it's a good idea to step aside. Again, I didn't have to worry about the financial part of it. I realized that that things would still be okay. And so it gave me a lot more freedom to do that. And so, yeah, super lucky that we moved when we did and that I have that coverage because I would not have been in that situation had I stayed where I was before.
Yeah, and we were talking before we started recording how when I had my cancer diagnosis, I was in residency and I was shopping for disability, but I hadn't actually done anything. And then once you get a diagnosis like that, it is very difficult to get coverage, like you're saying. So I definitely recommend that people, get that early on. You just never know what's going to happen. And that's what I wanted to touch on was, financially, the uncertainty is not as big of an issue for you, and that is wonderful, and you're fortunate in that way. However, you still have uncertainty in your life because now you have this diagnosis of something that your body can change over time and you don't really have a prediction of how that's going to work. So, how have you been dealing with that uncertainty?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I've done a lot more things than I would have done otherwise in that like I have feel like, okay, I need to get all these things done because maybe 5 years from now I might not be able to do them. I definitely have lived my life more fully as a result, trying to make the most of everything that I can do today, which in turn actually helps me be able to do those things longer. So like in 2023, I did two half Ironmans. I did Ironman Hawaii, and then I did a marathon after that, and then I did Boston Marathon in April and ran in the Paralympic trials in June. So within the course of a year, I did all of that. I never would have done all of that before Parkinson's, but I kind of had this mindset, oh my gosh, I need to go do all these things because I might not be able to do them forever. But then I meet Rhonda Fowles at Boston Marathon. And I'm like, oh, this could be a really long haul. I could still be doing this. So I was like, okay, maybe I
Oh,
need to
no,
slow down a little bit, but still keep trying to go. So I mean, it's definitely changed in that, like, I feel like I need to make the most of everything I can do now because I'm not going to be able to do all that forever. But in reality, none of us are going to be able to do all those things forever. And so, we're all aging, and Parkinson's is very similar. And, everybody can benefit from exercising more and focusing on our health and our sleep and, looking at a good diet. It's all the same thing that would help everybody. And if I just feel like it's put that into perspective for me that, like, yes, I have Parkinson's, but like all of these things that I'm doing for my health, like would help everybody else too. It's all the same things that would help other people. And so, yeah, this book I'm working on now is meant for people with Parkinson's, but I think if anybody reads it or if anybody likes it, I may write another book for everybody about the same sorts of things about, you know, dealing with getting older and finding ways to stay active and tools to stay motivated to stay active because we all know we need to exercise, but it can be really hard to get out the door and start doing it. And so just trying to help people find a way to do that is fun for me.
Yeah, that's great. Tell me more about details on the book. When is the timeline for the book release?
Yeah, so the book I've been playing with a lot of different titles, and so I've decided on one that kind of summarizes how I felt when I was first Googled why was my arm shaking, and I saw Parkinson's. And so the title is "Oh Crap, It's Parkinson's: A Rebel's Guide from Shock to Strength." And so it's intended for people newly diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, helping them deal with going through the stages of grief. Because a big diagnosis like that, I mean, I felt like I went through the stages of grief, grieving for the future that I had seen for myself previously and coming to terms with that. So helping people learn to do that, talk and share with their family members and their, a lot of things we just talked about are kind of the first section. I go into all the science of Parkinson's. I use a Alice in Wonderland metaphor to dive down the rabbit hole into brain neuroscience, um, which is kind of fun. That was my worst class in medical school. So the irony that I'm trying to teach people about neuroanatomy and neurotransmitters is somewhat amusing. But yeah, I'm learning a lot too by doing that. And then a little bit about the different causes of Parkinson's, helping people determine whether or not they should get genetic testing and what that means and what that could impact, and then tools to move forward and kick butt. So like how to start an exercise program, whether or not the decision to start medications, which is a big decision for a lot of people, and finding a positive way forward. Hoping to have it out by early next year, January 2026. I'm hoping to have it out by the World Parkinson Congress is in Phoenix in May of 2026. It's a meeting every 3 years. And I'm hoping to be able to share my book there at that meeting. As part of the book, I also share the stories of 15 people from around the world with Parkinson's or who are Parkinson's researchers, clinicians, basic science researchers and clinical researchers and advocates and Huntington Kabuga, obviously. So sharing the stories of all different perspectives, because I feel the Parkinson's community is amazing. And there's so many, people who want to help each other. And I've just been incredibly impressed by the community. So it's kind of a tribute to them as well.
It's wonderful. It's such a great sense of purpose that you have going, and I love the work you're doing. Is there any last advice that you would like to give listeners who are feeling stuck for whatever reason, are feeling like they don't have a sense of purpose and they want to get off the treadmill of achievement and do something different?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing that made the biggest difference was finding gratitude in everything. And I know it seems so basic, but just taking the time to find something that you're grateful for and looking at life from a positive standpoint. And that kind of helps put into perspective what's important for you. If is working 80 hours a week in a in medicine the way you want to spend your time? If so, that's great. But, figure out what's important and be grateful that you have the opportunity to make that change. So yeah, I think, for me, I've kind of been gung ho hardcore everything, but to realize that my job is not the most important thing, that my health is and that my family is. And that should come first. It should have been a no brainer, but like it took getting Parkinson's to kind of step back and make that a priority. Um, just on a slightly different note, the other thing I've kind of learned from all of this was, as an anesthesiologist, I don't see didn't see much clinic or any clinic, but in medicine, we learn to, come up with a differential diagnosis and, do some tests and then come up with a diagnosis and then say, okay, you have this disease and we're going to give you a treatment for it. Like, and in my mind, we're like, yay, I did a good job. But for the patient, that's the beginning of their journey. And so I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective until I, hear all these, stories of how patients felt when they heard the diagnosis from their doctor and how they felt it set them behind and that, it could have been delivered better. I've learned a lot. And, when I was still practicing, it did kind of change how I interacted with patients and made me much more empathetic too for how scary it can be to be on that side of it.
100% agree. Absolutely agree. As someone who's like been in the neuro OR, it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it changes how you take care of your patients. So
Sure.
thank you, Sarah, so much. This has been such a pleasure. I'm so excited about the inspiring work you're doing. And where can people find you? Do you have any sort of a website or social media that you want to tell people to go to?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. I'm Sara Whittingham. I do have a website. I had a horrible website designer who said they were in Texas, but they were actually in Pakistan, and my website they blew up a few months ago. So I'm trying to put it all back together. It's Parkinson's with a Z.org. It's coming together. I'll put the book information on there once that comes out too. But yeah, mostly I'm on Facebook right now, and I'm hoping to get my website back to where it should be.
Okay, well, by the time a lot of people listen to this, maybe it'll be there, and we'll
Exactly.
definitely drop the link in the notes. These episodes stay forever, so people will be able to see it and reference it and use this for their friends, for their colleagues, for themselves, for family members. It's just great information. So thank you so much for sharing today.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Good to see you.
You too.
So, thank you.